He watched me sink. My husband's lover had just pushed me into the pool, and he did nothing. His hand went to his phone, not to call 911, but to call security and delete the footage. He didn't know my real proof wasn't on a server. It was inside my body. And the sirens he was about to hear, 10 minutes later, were not for an ambulance. They were for him. The air at these TerraVex Innovations fundraisers always felt suffocating. But tonight, the Virginia humidity was an anvil. I stood near the edge of the infinity pool, my reflection staring back at me from the dark water. The party was a performance, a loud, glittering lie set against the backdrop of our sprawling estate, and I was the lead actress in a tragedy I hadn't auditioned for. Across the terrace, my husband, Julian Vance, was holding court. He was the brilliant CEO, the charismatic face of green technology, laughing with a cluster of venture capitalists. That laugh used to be the center of my world. Now, it was just a sound, practiced and hollow. He was mesmerizing, radiating a confidence that drew people in like moths. But I knew the truth. I knew the man beneath the billion-dollar brand. Every few minutes, his eyes would cut through the crowd and find me. It wasn't a look of concern or affection. It was surveillance. A quick, sharp assessment, checking if I was still playing my part, still smiling as the dutiful wife. And then there was her, Serafina Rourke, Sarah, his chief of staff. She was wearing a backless crimson dress, moving through the party as if she owned the place. She was touching arms, laughing too loudly, directing the catering staff. She was playing the hostess, in my home. She was Julian's mistress, and the sheer, unadulterated audacity of it made my skin crawl. Julian had insisted she organize this entire event. "She's the only one I trust with the details. Eliza," he'd said, his voice smooth as silk. "This deal is everything." I knew exactly which details he trusted her with. A sudden, acidic wave of nausea rolled through me. It wasn't just the sight of Sarah's hand lingering on Julian's arm, or the thick, cloying scent of the gardenias. I was pregnant. 4 weeks. A tiny, fragile secret I had barely allowed myself to acknowledge. I hadn't told a soul. The realization had hit me 2 days ago. A quiet shock that left me reeling. I didn't know if it was a miracle or a complication. Now, the smell of the smoked salmon appetizers was turning my stomach. I had to get away. I couldn't breathe. I slipped away from the noise, moving toward the far end of the pool, which was darker and shielded from the main patio by a row of tall cypress trees. I leaned against a large, decorative marble planter, closing my eyes for just a second, pressing a hand low on my stomach. Just get through the night. Just breathe. It's rude to hide, Eliza. My eyes snapped open. Sarah was standing right in front of me, a silhouette against the pool's glowing underwater lights. She had a champagne flute in one hand, her smile a thin, cruel line. "I'm not hiding, Serafina," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "I just needed some air." She took a slow, deliberate step closer, invading my space. I could smell the gin on her breath, sharp and bitter. "You look pale, worried." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial hiss. "You really think that will keep him?" Ice flooded my veins. It was so cold it burned. That. How could she possibly know I hadn't told anyone? My heart hammered against my ribs. "What are you talking about?" Sarah watched me. Her gaze dropped from my face to my hand, which was still protectively splayed over my abdomen. Her eyes widened, and then a slow, ugly smile of realization spread across her face. She had been guessing, fishing, and I had just given her the answer. "Oh my God," she whispered, a small, humorless laugh escaping her. "So it's true. You're actually pregnant." She looked past me for a moment, toward Julian, who was now schmoozing a senator, completely oblivious. When her eyes snapped back to mine, all traces of humor were gone. They were flat, cold, and resolved. Julian is done with you. He's finished. Your reign is over. Sarah, you don't know what you're— I know everything, she spat. I know he's serving you the papers next week, after this fundraiser is secured. I know he's moving me in. She took another step, backing me closer to the water's edge. Fine, she said, her voice dropping to a dead, flat tone. Let's see if it can swim. It happened so fast I couldn't even process the intent. She didn't just push me. She lunged, dropping the champagne flute and shoving me with both hands, hard, in the center of my chest. I am not a small woman, but the force was shocking, propelled by pure venom. I stumbled backward. My heel caught on the slick tile. My arms pinwheeled, grasping at nothing but the humid night air. I wasn't falling sideways. I was falling backward. The world tilted. There was a sickening, echoing crack as the back of my skull connected with the hard, unforgiving edge of the marble coping. Pain exploded behind my eyes, white-hot and blinding. Then came the cold. It wasn't a splash. It was an impact. The icy water of the deep end swallowed me whole. The shock of the temperature stole my breath before I could even take one. I sank like a stone, the shimmering lights of the party dissolving above me into a blurry, distorted mess of color. My lungs burned. I tried to inhale, but only water rushed in cold, chlorinated, and tasting of panic. I was drowning, and then, beneath the throbbing, starburst pain in my head, came a new sensation, a sharp, twisting cramp deep in my abdomen, a visceral, terrifying pain. The baby. My body was reacting to the impact, to the cold. I was dying, and my secret was dying with me. My head felt like it had split in two. The impact against the marble was a bright, deafening sound, followed by a pulsing, underwater throb. The world was a blur of distorted party lights and the sting of chlorine. My lungs were on fire, screaming for air I couldn't find. My dress, a heavy silk, was dragging me down like an anchor. I was drowning, and the panic was a cold, solid thing in my chest. I thrashed, my arms and legs heavy, and my gaze locked on the terrace above. He was there. Julian. He was standing on the stone overlook, not 10 feet from where I had gone in. The wine glass was still in his hand, held perfectly steady. He didn't flinch. He didn't drop it. He didn't move a muscle. He saw me. Our eyes met through the shimmering water. He saw his wife, his pregnant wife, hit her head and sink. He saw the struggle. He saw the blood beginning to cloud the water around my hair, and he did nothing. He didn't jump. He didn't shout my name. He didn't even look alarmed. His face was a mask of pure, calculating calm. I watched, in that surreal, slow-motion terror, as he turned his head slightly. He gave a small, discreet signal to his head of security, Mark, who was standing by the bar. It was a gesture, not for help, but for control. Then the screams started. A few guests on the patio, women who had followed me out, had seen the splash. My God, someone's in the pool. It's Eliza. The music stuttered and died. There was a surge of movement as people rushed toward the edge, but they were stopped. Julian's private security team, not uniformed guards, but men in sharp black suits moved in unison. They weren't trying to save me. They were forming a human wall, holding the guests back. Please, step back, one of them commanded. Give her space. Step back. My lungs were collapsing. Black spots bloomed in front of my eyes. Just as my consciousness began to fade, a rough hand grabbed a fistful of my dress and hair. I was dragged, coughing and choking, from the water and dumped onto the marble tiles like a piece of garbage. I collapsed, vomiting water and bile. The night air was freezing, and a violent, uncontrollable shaking seized my entire body. I touched my head, and my fingers came away slick and dark with blood. A warm stream was running past my temple, into my eye, blurring my vision. I heard his footsteps, the expensive, assured click of his Italian loafers on the stone. He was coming. I looked up, my mind still fogged by the impact, desperately searching for the man I married. Julian walked right past me. He didn't slow down. He didn't look at me. He walked directly to Serafina, who was standing nearby, her hand pressed to her mouth, her shoulders beginning to tremble in a masterful performance of shock. He put his arms around her, pulling her into his chest. "Sarah," he said, his voice a low, concerned murmur. "Are you all right, my God? You must be terrified." He turned to the ring of stunned, silent guests, his voice rising, taking charge. It was a terrible accident. Eliza must have had a little too much to drink. She slipped. He was already writing the story. I was the unstable, drunk wife. She was the innocent, horrified chief of staff. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, my teeth chattering. The blood was dripping onto the white marble. "Julian," I choked out. She pushed me." He turned his head and looked down at me. For the first time, I saw him completely. The charming mask was gone. His eyes were not angry. They were not concerned. They were flat, cold, and full of a final chilling contempt. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Then, shielding his mouth from the guests, he turned to his security chief, Mark, who was now at his elbow. Julian's voice was a whisper, but it was sharp and absolute. "I want the footage from cameras 7 and 8, the ones on the back terrace." He paused, his gaze flicking to me for a fraction of a second. "Delete it. Now. Wipe the server. I don't care how. Is that clear? This is a private matter." My heart stopped. The cameras. He thought the video was the only evidence. He thought he could just erase it, erase her crime, erase his betrayal, as if it never happened. He dismissed the guard with a sharp nod and turned back to me. His men were already ushering the guests back inside, muttering about a private medical situation. Julian crouched down beside me. He was so close I could smell the faint scent of his cologne. He arranged his face into a mask of worried concern, a look he had perfected, but his eyes remained dead. He leaned in, his voice so low only I could hear the venom. "You should have known when to stop, Eliza." I was a prop, a problem he had already solved. Julian had straightened his jacket, his face a mask of grave concern as he returned to his most valuable investors. I could hear his voice, that smooth, reassuring baritone that had charmed senators and billionaires alike. It was a terrible shock. She hasn't been herself. She must have had too much champagne and lost her footing. I was lying on the cold marble, a pool of chlorinated water and my own blood spreading around me. A security guard stood a few feet away, not offering a hand, not offering a blanket, just securing the scene as his boss had ordered. Julian was letting me freeze. He was letting me bleed to prove his point. I was hysterical. I was done. Every second that ticked by was another nail in the coffin he was building for me. The pain in my head was a dull, heavy spike. The twisting in my stomach was a sharper, colder fear. I pressed a hand to it, a secret prayer. Hold on. Please, just hold on. It was 10 minutes. 10 minutes to the second since Serafina's hands had shoved me into the dark. A sound sliced through the night. It started as a distant wail, and Julian actually looked relieved, nodding to his guests. That's the ambulance I called. Just a precaution." But the sound didn't stay distant. It grew. Fast. It wasn't the lonely siren of a single ambulance. It was multiple sirens, overlapping, a chorus of authority, and it was heading right for our gate. Julian's practiced smile faltered. He looked at his head of security. "Who is that I told you no police? I told you to handle this privately." The guard was already fumbling with his earpiece. "Sir, they're not stopping. They're government vehicles." Julian's face went from confused to angry to a stark, bloodless white. The headlights flooded the manicured lawn, sweeping over the stunned faces of the guests. 5 black sedans, heavy, gleaming, and official, roared up the private drive. They didn't slow for the valet. They fanned out with tactical precision, blocking the driveway, the service entrance, and the main gate. Every exit was sealed. Julian stumbled back a step. Who in God's name? Who called the police? Doors opened in perfect, trained unison. Men in dark suits stepped out. All business, all presence. The passenger door of the lead car opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, his silver hair immaculate, his suit costing more than most of the cars in the driveway. He moved with an unassailable gravity. A man who didn't just walk into a room, but occupied it. He was Senator Robert Collier. He was my father. "Senator," Julian gasped, rushing forward, his hands raised in a gesture of frantic welcome. "Thank God, Eliza. There's been an accident. I don't know what these men are." My father didn't even look at him. He walked right past Julian, his eyes finding me on the ground, and his face, which was famous for its political calm, became a mask of cold, controlled fury. He was at my side in an instant, crouching down, his knees landing in the wet grime. "Eliza," he said, his voice a low rumble. He immediately began shrugging off his heavy, expensive suit jacket. I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. "She pushed me. Dad, she pushed me." He wrapped the coat around my shoulders, his large hands surprisingly gentle. The smell of wool and his familiar, faint scent of cedar surrounded me. "Are you okay, Sparrow?" he asked, his voice now soft, meant only for me. "My medical team is right behind." As he spoke, a private, high-end ambulance pulled silently up the drive, its lights off, 2 paramedics waiting by the door. Not 911. Julian, seeing his entire narrative disintegrating, rushed over. He tried to reclaim his role as the husband. "Robert, I swear, it was just a terrible, terrible accident. She slipped. She hit her head. I was just taking care of her." He reached down, putting his hand on my shoulder, on top of my father's jacket. My father's head snapped up. He looked at Julian's hand on me, then at Julian's face. The contempt in his eyes was so pure, so absolute, it was like a physical blow. "I've seen the entire server log. Julian," my father said, his voice flat, clear, and deadly. "Not the deleted version your man is currently trying to wipe." Julian froze. His hand snatched back from my shoulder as if he'd been electrocuted. His mouth opened, a dry, rasping sound, but no words came out. "Get your hands off my daughter." It wasn't the push that started this. The push was just the desperate, sloppy end of a game I had already won. It started 3 months ago. It didn't start with lipstick on a collar or late-night calls. Julian was far too disciplined for such clumsy mistakes. It started with a number, before I was Julian's wife. I was Eliza Collier, financial analyst and attorney. I specialized in unraveling the most complex, high-stakes corporate fraud cases in the country. I gave up my career when I married Julian, believing I was investing in his dream, in our dream Terravex Innovations, a company that was meant to save the world with revolutionary green technology. One night, I couldn't sleep. Julian was supposedly in Zurich, closing a second-round funding deal. I was reviewing some household accounts on our shared server, and I saw a file he'd accidentally saved to the wrong directory, a wire transfer confirmation. It was for $10 million. It wasn't the amount that made my blood run cold. It was the source, a shell corporation based in Cyprus, with a name I recognized from a sanctions list I had worked on 3 years prior. It was a front for a Russian oligarch, a man whose assets had been frozen by the U.S. government. My heart started a low, heavy drumbeat. This wasn't an investment. This was money laundering. That night, my old life came roaring back. I wasn't a wife. I was an investigator. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life. I smiled at Julian when he returned, kissing him, listening to his fabricated stories of Swiss bankers. And at night, after he fell asleep, I went to work. I slipped into his home office and resurrected the skills I had buried. His firewalls were good, but I was better. I had helped design the protocols they were based on. What I found was staggering. TerraVex wasn't just a green tech company. It was a sophisticated, high-volume washing machine. Julian was using his reputation as a climate innovator as a cover to move hundreds of millions of dollars for sanctioned oligarchs, rogue state actors, and arms dealers. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was committing massive, treasonous federal crimes. He was using my family's name, my father's political reputation, as a shield. The real proof, I knew, wouldn't be on a server he could wipe. It would be cold. It would be offline. I knew the combination to his private safe, hidden behind a false panel in his library. Our wedding anniversary. The sickening irony of it. Inside, beneath stacks of bearer bonds, was a small, sleek hardware wallet. My hands didn't shake. I cloned the entire drive. It was all there. Every ledger, every untraceable transaction, every encrypted account number. This was the evidence. This was the kill shot. The video of the pool, the one he was so desperate to delete, was just a bonus. It was the cherry on top of his indictment. Once I had the criminal case, I finally let myself look for the personal one. I found the emails, a dedicated, hidden chain between his account and Sarah's. My world, which was already tilting, fell completely off its axis. They weren't just sleeping together. They were conspiring. I read as they planned my exit. Julian was preparing a new round of surety documents for me to sign. Papers that would bond all my personal assets, my inheritance, my family's money to TerraVex. He was going to make me his financial guarantor. When the company inevitably collapsed under investigation, I wouldn't just be implicated. I would be the one left holding the bag. I would be the scapegoat. Julian would plead ignorance, claiming his unstable wife handled the finances, and he and Sarah would walk away with the clean money. But it was the last email, from Sarah, that stopped my breathing. It was dated 2 days before Julian's Zurich trip. Julian, we can't wait. She's getting suspicious. I can feel it. We have to get rid of her before she signs, just in case she actually reads the fine print. We need to push her out now. If words don't work, we can always use my pregnancy as leverage to force the divorce. My pregnancy. I stared at the words. She was pregnant, too. The nausea that hit me then had nothing to do with my own 4-week-old secret. This whole time, he wasn't just replacing me. He was planning to frame me, bankrupt my family, and start a new life with his pregnant mistress, all funded by blood money. That was the man I watched from under the water. That was the man who had just ordered my murder erased. It was 1 week before the party, 1 week before the sirens, before the blood on the marble. I had the cloned hardware wallet. I had the emails. I had the irrefutable proof that my husband was a traitor, a con artist, and a federal criminal. And I had proof that he was sleeping with Serafina Rourke. I knew everything, but I needed to know him. I needed to see the liar in action. I had to understand what kind of monster I was dealing with before I set the trap. I decided to confront him, not with the millions in laundered money or the sanctions lists, not with the plan to frame me. I would confront him as a simple, heartbroken wife. I would give him only the affair. I wanted to see what he would do with it. I waited until a Tuesday night. He was in his study, a glass of expensive scotch at his elbow, reviewing the plans for the fundraiser. "Julian," I said from the doorway. He looked up, his face breaking into that easy, disarming smile. "Eliza." "Hey, just going over the seating charts. The caterer is finalized." I walked in. I didn't cry. I wasn't shaking. I held a single printed sheet of paper in my hand. It wasn't an email. It was a hotel folio. A 2-night stay at a discreet boutique hotel in D.C., paid for by a Teravex corporate card, dated during his supposed Zurich trip. 2 nights, 1 king bed, room service charges for 2. I placed it on his desk. "I didn't know your Zurich trip involved a detour to Georgetown," I said. His smile didn't fade. It froze. It was a terrifying, hollow thing. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. The calculating CEO brain was spinning, running scenarios, looking for an angle. He had been caught. He didn't yell. He didn't deny it. He did the one thing I never, in a million years, would have anticipated. He slid out of his $3,000 chair, walked around the desk, and knelt at my feet. He didn't just kneel. He collapsed. He grabbed my hands, his head bowed, and he began to sob. It was a full-body, gut-wrenching performance. I watched, detached, as his shoulders shook, as actual tears hit the expensive rug. "Eliza," he choked out, his voice thick. "God, I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I just stood there. I was the rock. He was the wave. "It meant nothing," he whispered, looking up at me, his eyes red and pleading. "It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless, disgusting mistake." He was good. He was very good. "It's her," he said, the tears instantly drying, his voice hardening with a new, practiced venom. "It's Sarah." And there it was, the pivot. She's not well. Eliza, she's obsessed. She threatened me." I kept my face a mask of confusion. "Threatened you, Julian. She works for you." "She's blackmailing me," he said, the words rushing out now, a torrent of calculated lies. "She's been cornering me, threatening to go to the press, to you, with some fabricated story. This," he gestured at the hotel folio. "This was a setup. She arranged it. I was drunk. I don't even remember." He was already rewriting history, but he wasn't done. My God, she's desperate. She's even lying. She's telling people she's pregnant. With my child." He laughed. A short, hysterical, utterly fake sound. "To try and force me to leave you. Can you imagine pregnant? It's a pathetic, transparent lie." I almost reeled. He was using the truth as his greatest weapon. He knew about her pregnancy, the one I'd read about in their emails, and he was preemptively painting it as a lie, as a tool of a crazy, obsessed woman. "She's jealous of you," he continued, his voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper, as if I were the victim of Sarah, not him. "She's jealous of this house, of your family, of your status. You're Eliza Collier. She's a staffer." I had to end this. I pulled my hands from his grasp. "Then fire her." The words hit him like a slap. Panic flashed in his eyes, real and sudden. "Fire her, Julian. If she's blackmailing you, if she's unstable, get rid of her. Call security. Call the police." "I can't," he said, scrambling to his feet. "Not yet, Eliza, not yet. You have to trust me." He started pacing, running his hands through his perfect hair. This fundraiser it's the linchpin. It's the final contract for the Clean Energy Consortium. It's everything we've worked for. Sarah, she's all over the contracts. She's the only one who has the trust of the investors." He grabbed my arms, his grip tight, his eyes wild. "If I fire her now, she won't just go quietly. She'll go nuclear. She'll sabotage the deal. She'll call your father with her lies. She'll ruin everything. Our entire future." He took a deep breath, composing himself, putting the mask of the loving husband back on. "Please," he whispered. "Just 1 more week. That's all I'm asking. Let me get through this party. Let us secure this final contract. After that, I'll have the power. I'll have the leverage to cut her out, to pay her off, to get her out of our lives for good. I swear it." He looked at me, his gaze searching. Just play the part. Be the wife. Be the hostess. I promise you. After this party, she is gone, and it will be just us again. He thought he was a genius. He thought he had just convinced his stupid, heartbroken wife to stay quiet for one more week so he could close the deal that would finance his escape, all while framing his mistress as the villain. He didn't know that playing the part was my idea, too. I let a single perfect tear roll down my cheek. I let my shoulders slump in defeat. Okay, I whispered. One more week. For the company. For us. He pulled me into a hug, a tight, suffocating embrace of triumph. Thank you, he murmured into my hair. It'll all be over soon. I stood in his arms, my eyes wide open, staring at the wall over his shoulder. I was the wife. I was the victim. And I was the trap. He thought he was closing a deal. He had no idea he was the one being sold. The hug lasted exactly 3 seconds. The moment Julian released me, I stepped back, my face a carefully constructed mask of a weary, trusting wife. He went back to his desk, already picking up his phone to text Sarah. No doubt, telling her the Eliza problem was handled. I walked out of the study. I didn't go to our bedroom. I went to the garage. I drove. I didn't speed. I didn't run any red lights. My hands were steady on the wheel. The tears I had faked for Julian were long gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. His entire performance, his fake sobs, his masterful lies, it all confirmed one thing: he was weak. He was a bully and a coward, and he thought I was a fool. 20 minutes later, I was walking past the security detail in the lobby of the Russell Senate office building. They knew me. I was Senator Collier's daughter. My father was in his private office, a cavernous room of dark wood, leather, and the heavy silence of power. He was reviewing a judiciary bill. He looked up as I entered, his expression neutral. He was not a man given to emotional displays. I didn't cry. I didn't say hello. I reached into my purse, past my wallet, past my keys, and pulled out the small, sleek hardware wallet, the clone of Julian's entire criminal enterprise. I placed it on the center of his desk, on top of the bill he was reading. It made a small, solid click. My father looked at the drive. He looked at me. I am divorcing him, I said. My voice was low and even. But before I do, I want him to pay. He's been using our name. He's been using your name as a shield for his crimes. My father didn't ask what I meant. He didn't ask if I was okay. He simply plugged the drive into a secure, air-gapped laptop he kept in his desk drawer. For 5 minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft tapping of his keyboard. He read the ledgers. He saw the Cypress Shell Corporation. He saw the sanctioned names. He saw the emails between Julian and Serafina. He saw the plan to bankrupt me. Finally. He closed the laptop. He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers, his gaze unreadable. Well, he said, his voice a cold, quiet rumble. He isn't just an adulterer, Eliza. He's a traitor. He's a remarkably stupid criminal. He's planning to leave the country after this fundraiser, I said. He's using the final contract as his exit liquidity. He thinks he's framed me for all of it. He thinks you're a fool, my father said. It wasn't an insult. It was a tactical assessment. I know. He and the woman, this. Serafina, my father continued, his mind already 3 steps ahead. They are desperate. They have a timeline. They believe you are the only obstacle left. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Capitol. He will try to neutralize you, before this party, or at the party. He can't risk you getting suspicious and backing out of signing those surety papers. He will try to make you look unstable. I walked to the window and stood beside him. I know, and I'm going to let him. My father turned to look at me. He's already convinced I'm a heartbroken, gullible wife, I said. He just begged me to play the part at the party to save his big deal. He has no idea I know about the money. He thinks the only problem is the affair. I'm going to be the perfect bait. A flicker of something pride, perhaps, passed through my father's eyes. He was a cold man, but he was a calculating one. He understood a strategic trap when he saw one. Good, he said. If he's going to make a move, we let him make it. We let him commit an overt, undeniable act. He looked back out the window. I will have a federal security team in the vicinity, plainclothes. I'll also have a private medical unit on standby, just in case. They'll be 5 minutes out. You'll have a panic button. You just call. I have something better, I said. I reached up and touched the necklace I was wearing. It was a simple, modern piece. A small, platinum and diamond pendant Julian had given me for our first anniversary. He thought it was just a symbol of his wealth. I had it hollowed out 3 weeks ago. This is a custom-built emergency transmitter, I said. It's waterproof, it's shock-resistant, and it's monitoring my biometrics. My father's eyebrows raised. If my heart rate spikes to a panic level, or if my body temperature drops suddenly, I continued, or if this pendant is submerged in water for more than 20 seconds, it sends an automatic encrypted distress signal with GPS coordinates directly to your chief of staff's secure line. I looked at my father. I'm not going to call. I'm going to let Julian or Sarah make their move. I'm going to let them think they've won. My father nodded, a slow, grim smile touching his lips. He thinks he's trapping you. I know, I said. Let him try. Sarah's push wasn't an accident. It wasn't a complication. It was the entire point. She didn't just shove me. She activated the single, perfect, undeniable piece of evidence. She started a clock that could not be stopped. She triggered the trap. I woke up to the steady, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. The first thing I felt wasn't pain, but silence. This wasn't a chaotic, fluorescent-lit emergency room. It was a private, secure suite, high above the city, with reinforced windows and a view of the Potomac. My father's security detail was stationed outside the door. I was safe. My father's personal physician, Dr. Eris, had already been in. The cut on my head was superficial. 5 stitches, neatly hidden just below my hairline. A mild concussion. Eliza, he'd said, his voice gentle. But the scan is clear. You're going to be fine. I waited until the nurse left the room. My hand, which had never left my stomach, was flat and protective. And the baby, I whispered. He smiled, a small, kind expression. He'd already run the tests. The heartbeat is strong, 4 weeks along, and already a fighter. Your secret is safe, Eliza, and so is this little one. A wave of profound, shuddering relief washed over me. The cold water hadn't taken everything. My child was safe. My proof was safe. While I was being scanned and stitched, my father was downstairs, setting the second trap. Julian, I was told, had been pacing the surgical waiting room for over 2 hours, a frantic, wild energy coming off him. My father's team had separated him and Sarah immediately upon our arrival. They were witnesses, not family, and they were not permitted access to me. Julian had been demanding to see his wife, playing the part of the terrified husband. Finally, my father walked through the double doors, the very picture of a powerful man shattered by grief. His jacket was gone, already bagged as evidence. I'd later learn, and his tie was yanked loose. His face was a mask of gray exhaustion. Julian rushed him. Senator Robert, my God, is she okay, Eliza? My father stopped. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at the floor. His shoulders slumped. He let the silence hang in the air, a heavy, suffocating weight, letting Julian's frantic questions die in his throat. The baby, Julian finally choked out. He had to. He knew Sarah had let it slip at the pool. My father raised his head, and his eyes. God, he was a brilliant actor, were filled with a devastating, quiet sorrow. Eliza. She lost the baby. Julian. My father's voice was thick. The fall, the impact against the concrete, and the shock from the cold water. The doctors, they did everything they could. It was too late. We had planned for this. We had anticipated the performance. Julian did exactly what we expected. He collapsed. He grabbed the back of a waiting room chair, his knuckles white. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. No, he whispered. No. Oh, God. No, not the baby. But my father, a man who had built a career on reading the subtle, high-stakes tales of senators and diplomats for 30 years, saw it. He told me about it later, his voice flat and cold, before the manufactured sobs, before the Oscar-worthy performance of devastation. For a fraction of a second, Julian's entire body relaxed. A tiny, uncontrollable flicker of pure, unadulterated relief flashed in his eyes. Sarah's pregnancy was his, but mine was the one that mattered. Mine was the one that guaranteed me a permanent, unassailable stake in his legacy. And now, he thought, it was gone. The complication was gone. The motive Sarah had shouted into the night air had just been neatly miscarried. He had just solved his biggest problem. My father let him grieve for a full 30 seconds. Then, he placed a heavy, comforting hand on Julian's shoulder. "Son," my father said, his voice heavy, "there's more." Julian looked up, his face a perfect mask of tragedy. What else is she?" "The shock," my father said, his voice low. "The trauma of the miscarriage, and the blow to her head. The doctors are calling it dissociative amnesia. They're hoping it's temporary." Julian stared, his fake tears drying instantly. "Amnesia. What do you mean? Amnesia? I don't understand." "She doesn't remember the accident." "Julian," my father said, his voice breaking just enough. "She remembers the party. She remembers talking to guests by the patio, and then nothing. It's a blank. Nothing until she woke up in this room. She doesn't remember falling. She doesn't remember anything about what happened at that pool. It was the final, perfect lie." I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, picturing Julian's mind working. A man like him doesn't hear bad news. He hears opportunity. He had just run down his mental checklist. 1. The video footage, the only direct evidence of the attack. He'd ordered it deleted. He believed it was gone. 2. The baby, the motive, the one thing that tied me to him forever. Miscarried. Gone. 3. The victim, the only person who heard Sarah's threat, the only one who felt the push. Her memory wiped. Gone. He was safe. He was completely, utterly, and perfectly safe. He thought he had won. He thought I was a broken, blank slate, a grieving, amnesiac wife he could comfort, control, and eventually discard. He had no idea he was the one in the trap. He came in just after noon. He didn't knock. He just appeared in the doorway of my private room, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, his face a perfect picture of exhausted, loving concern. I made sure my eyes were hazy as I woke up. I looked at him, letting a flicker of confusion cross my face. "Julian." My voice was a dry, weak whisper. He rushed to my side, a surge of false relief. "Eliza. Oh my God. Eliza, you're awake." He sat on the edge of the bed, his hands finding mine. They were warm. I felt nothing. "Julian, what happened?" I asked, playing the part my father had written for me. "I don't remember. I remember the party. I was talking to the Hendersons by the bar. And then, nothing." I touched the bandage on my head. "My head hurts so much." His expression softened with so much manufactured love it made my stomach turn. He squeezed my hand. "Shh, it's okay. You're okay now," he murmured, his voice that low, soothing baritone. "You had a A terrible accident. Love. I watched him struggle for the words. You just slipped. By the pool. You must have lost your footing on the marble. You hit your head. He looked down, as if the memory was too painful. It was so fast. God, Eliza, I was so terrified. I thought I'd lost you. I slipped, I said, my voice trembling just enough. Yes, but it's okay. It doesn't matter now. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, his lips lingering on my skin. The touch felt like a spider. I'm right here. I'm going to take care of you. We lost. We lost the baby. Eliza, I'm so sorry. But you're here. I'm here. We'll get through it. He was holding my hand, comforting his amnesiac wife, believing with every fiber of his arrogant being that he was in control. He thought he was home free. At that exact moment, 20 miles away, the glass doors of the Terravex Innovations Tower slid open. My father hadn't wasted a second. While Julian was pacing the waiting room, my father had been on a secure line. The hardware wallet, my pristine copy of Julian's entire criminal history, had been messengered to the head of the FBI's white-collar crime division. A dozen agents, vests on, warrants in hand, flooded the lobby. They secured the elevators and hit the executive floor and the IT department simultaneously. Julian's head of security, Mark, the man who had followed the order to delete the footage, was met by 2 agents before he could even touch his keyboard. We have a warrant for your servers, local and cloud. Step away from the terminal, the lead agent commanded. The financial team already knew what they were looking for. My father hadn't just given them the drive. He'd given them the map. They were already confirming the wire transfers from the sanctioned Russian accounts, the Cyprus Shell Corporation, the millions in laundered funds. The financial case was locked tight within an hour. But the other team was looking for the video. Mark, Julian's man, was almost smug. There's nothing there. The drives were wiped. An unfortunate data corruption. The FBI agent just smiled. We're not interested in the local drives. Julian was a tech CEO. He was also an idiot. He had preached redundancy and state-of-the-art security to his investors for years. Terravex didn't just have an on-site server. It had a top-tier, encrypted, off-site cloud backup, an undeletable archive. He'd called it in a press release. He had forgotten about his own marketing bullshit in his panic. It took the federal tech agent less than 10 minutes to access the archive. I've got it, she called out. Camera 7, pool terrace, time-stamped 10:01 p.m., last night. They played the file. It wasn't grainy. It was perfect. High-definition, color-corrected footage. They saw me, backing away. They saw Sarah, her face twisted in a snarl. They heard her voice, sharp and clear on the sensitive audio. Let's see if it can swim. They watched, frame by frame, as she lunged. They saw the two-handed shove. They saw my head connect with the marble. They saw the splash, and the dark water. And then they found the final nail. They cross-referenced the server logs with employee emails, and there it was. An email sent from Julian Vance's personal account to Mark's. Timestamp 10:03 p.m., exactly 2 minutes after I went into the water. The subject line was 2 words. In all caps, delete immediately. The body of the email was just as simple. Wipe the footage from cameras 7 and 8, the back terrace, scrub the server, confirm when done. This is a private family matter. It was the smoking gun. It wasn't just assault. It wasn't just massive financial fraud. It was conspiracy. It was a direct, undeniable, and monumentally stupid act of obstruction of justice. And back in the hospital room, my husband, the criminal mastermind, was still holding my hand, his face a mask of love. You just rest, Eliza, he whispered. Everything is going to be fine. He was still there an hour later, having fully settled into his role, the loving husband. He had a tray of food from the cafeteria, and he was peeling an apple for me with a small, serrated knife. The doctor said you should try to eat something. Get your strength back, he said, his voice a gentle, condescending coo. I'll take you home tomorrow. We can get out of this place, put it all behind us. He was carving the apple in one long, perfect spiral. He was so calm. He was so confident in his win. Then his phone vibrated on the bedside table, a harsh, buzzing sound that cut through the quiet of the room. He glanced at the screen. It was his personal lawyer. He sighed, a small, put-upon sound, as if annoyed by the interruption to our domestic moment. I've got to take this, he murmured, giving me a soft, I'll be right back smile. He answered, his voice still in husband mode. David. Hi, listen, I'm at the hospital with Eliza. Can this... He stopped, the hand holding the apple, the hand holding the phone. Both froze. The color drained from his face, not slowly, but in one instant, sickening rush. He went from a healthy tan to a waxy, gray-white in a single second. What? He whispered. His voice was no longer smooth. It was a strangled, hollow sound. He was listening, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. I could hear the faint, panicked screaming of his lawyer through the earpiece. FBI! What do you mean? FBI! Julian hissed, stumbling back a step from the bed. A warrant for what, David? What are you talking about? There was a pause. Julian's breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling too fast. They have the ledgers, he choked out. The cloud. No, that's not possible. That's encrypted. That's... Another, longer pause. The lawyer was clearly delivering the final, fatal blow. The video. Julian's voice was barely audible. They have the video, David. They have all of it. The apple and the knife fell from his hand. They hit the linoleum floor with a dull, wet clatter. He stared at the far wall, his mind, that brilliant, criminal mind, finally catching up. The bloodless, terrified mask of a cornered animal. Slowly, his head turned. He looked at me. I was no longer slumped against the pillows. I was sitting perfectly straight. My gaze wasn't hazy. It wasn't confused. It was sharp. It was clear. And it was cold. All the weakness, all the fear, all the amnesia was gone. I was Eliza Collier again. He saw it. He saw the truth. You, he breathed. You forgot about the cloud, Julian, I said. My voice was as calm and clear as the hospital air. Your own off-site, undeletable redundancy. You preached it to your investors. You should have believed your own press. His face, which had been white with panic, now contorted. A dark, primal rage twisted his features. The mask of the loving husband didn't just slip, he tore it off. You, he roared, his voice cracking. You bitch, you set me up. He lunged. He didn't hesitate. He lunged across the bed, his hands out, grabbing for my throat. He was going to finish what Sarah started. He never made it. The door to my room flew open, crashing against the interior wall with a sound like a gunshot. 2 federal agents, their vests on, their hands on their holsters, stepped into the room. My father's security detail was right behind them. Julian froze, his hands inches from my neck, his body half sprawled across my bed. He looked at them, then at me, his face a grotesque mask of shock and fury. Julian Vance, the lead agent said, his voice bored, as if he did this every day. You're under arrest. Arrest? Julian scoffed, his voice trembling. For what? This is my wife. This is a private matter. This is... You are under arrest for multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and obstruction of justice, the agent said, walking forward. He grabbed Julian by the arm and hauled him off the bed, spinning him around and slamming him against the wall, all in one smooth, practiced motion. You can't do this, Julian shrieked, the sound high and thin. I know people. I will have your badge for this. Put your hands behind your back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. They dragged him, still protesting, still threatening, toward the door. As they pulled him into the hallway, a second team of agents was coming up the corridor. They were flanking a screaming, thrashing Serafina Rourke. She had clearly been arrested in the lobby, probably trying to get to Julian. Her hair was a mess. Her crimson dress from the party was rumpled. She saw Julian, her face, already streaked with tears and terror, contorted with pure, animalistic rage. It was him, she screamed, her voice echoing off the sterile hospital walls. It was all him. He made me do it. He forced me. Tell them, Julian, tell them you forced me. She fought against the agents holding her. I'm pregnant with his child. You can't do this to me. He's the criminal. Julian, cuffed and held, stopped struggling. He turned his head and looked at the woman he had been planning to escape with. He looked at his partner in crime, his co-conspirator, his mistress, and he spat. You, he roared back at her, his voice a guttural, broken sound. You stupid, stupid bitch. You ruined everything. You couldn't keep your mouth shut. You ruined it all. They dragged them in opposite directions, their screams echoing down the hall, each one a testament to their own magnificent, self-serving betrayal. The courtroom was a circus, and I was the only calm spectator. Julian and Serafina, once partners in crime, were now just rats in a trap, desperately trying to eat each other to get a smaller piece of cheese. Julian's high-priced attorney, the one he could no longer afford, was painting a masterpiece of misogyny. Eliza Collier, he argued, his voice dripping with fake sympathy, is a woman scorned, a paranoid, unstable wife, lashing out after discovering a simple, regrettable affair. She fabricated this entire financial conspiracy to punish her husband. I sat there, motionless, as he described me as hysterical and prone to fantasy. Then came Sarah's public defender. Her strategy was just as pathetic. Serafina Rourke was a victim, she pleaded. She was a young woman, manipulated, coerced, and psychologically abused by a powerful narcissistic sociopath. Julian Vance forced her, threatened her, and controlled her every move. They were both trying to sell a story. Julian's was that I was crazy. Sarah's was that she was weak. The truth was that they were both just pathetic. The prosecution calls Eliza Collier. I walked to the stand. My heels made a steady, sharp click on the marble floor. I didn't look at Julian. I didn't look at Sarah. I looked at the jury. I swore the oath. The prosecutor was methodical. Mrs. Collier, can you identify the man who controlled these offshore accounts? Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady. My husband, Julian Vance. And can you describe your husband's reaction the night you were assaulted? Julian's lawyer leaped to his feet. Objection assumes facts, not in evidence. She has amnesia. The prosecutor smiled. On the contrary, Your Honor, Mrs. Collier's memory was, in fact, never lost. It was a strategic lie, fed to the defendant by her father, Senator Collier, to ensure the defendant would incriminate himself further. A gasp went through the courtroom. Julian's head snapped up. His mask of the wronged husband shattered. He was staring at me, his eyes blazing with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. He finally understood. I continued my testimony for 2 hours. I laid out the financial ledgers I had copied. I detailed the wire transfers. I explained, with the cold precision of the analyst I used to be, exactly how he had used his green tech company to wash millions for sanctioned oligarchs. I was not a scorned wife. I was the expert witness who had built the entire case. When I finished, I sat down. The prosecution has one final piece of evidence, the prosecutor announced. A video file recovered from the defendant's own cloud-based server archive. The large screens in the courtroom, the ones Julian had once used to show his innovations to investors, flickered to life. It was silent. The entire room watched. They saw me. They saw Sarah, her face a mask of rage. They heard her voice, sharp and clear. "Let's see if it can swim." They saw the push. They saw the sickening crack of my head on the marble. They saw me disappear under the water. Then the camera panned. It caught Julian, standing by the terrace, wineglass in hand, watching. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just watched me drown. And then they heard his voice, calm and clear, giving the order to his security chief. "Delete it. Now. Wipe the server. This is a private matter." Sarah was the first to break. She let out a strangled animal wail. "He made me. You see, he's the monster. He was going to let her die." Julian lunged up from his chair, his face a purple mask of fury. "You stupid bitch!" he roared, pointing at her across the aisle. You did this. If you had just kept your mouth shut, we would be gone. You ruined everything." "Liar!" she screamed back, tears of pure, undiluted terror streaming down her face. "You were going to frame me just like you framed her. Order!" The judge bellowed, slamming his gavel. "Order, order in the court." It was useless. They were rabid. It took 4 bailiffs to restrain Julian, to cuff Sarah as she tried to claw her way out of the room. The jury just watched, their faces a mixture of disgust and horror. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. The judge delivered the sentences 2 days later. Serafina Rourke, for assault with a deadly weapon and conspiracy, received 7 years. Julian Vance, for multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, received the maximum, 20 years in a federal prison. 20 years. As the bailiffs took him, cuffed and shackled, he stopped. He looked over at me one last time. His eyes were hollow, dead. He had lost. He had lost his company, his freedom, his money. He was a shell. I stood up. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. I just stood, tall and straight. And I calmly, deliberately, placed one hand on my stomach. It was no longer the flat, 4-week secret it had been at the pool. It was the firm, unmistakable, 5-month curve of my pregnancy, visible even under my suit. I watched his face as he processed it. His eyes flickered from my face, down to my hand, to the swell of my belly. I watched the realization hit him, the final, devastating truth. The baby was never lost. The miscarriage was a lie. The amnesia was a lie. His legacy, the one thing he had been so desperate to secure first with Sarah, then by destroying me, was safe. It was just no longer his. I had taken it. I had taken his name, his money in the divorce settlement, and his child, and I was walking away with all of it. His face didn't just fall, it caved in. It was the look of a man who realized, in one instant, that he hadn't just been beaten, he had been erased. My father opened the courtroom door. I walked out, past the cameras, past the reporters, and into the sunlight. I left the wreckage of Julian Vance behind me, and I never, ever looked back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad I could share this with you. Comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you can, hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people.